Done.
Okay, here, I can.
I don't want to touch this camera.
Sit here, I guess. We'll stand.
Also, balance out.
Just if you need me to switch, just point at me.
What in the world?
Where's the reason?
Where are my Fairview
Wait, do you have my phone?
It's
Okay.
Did you see David High School? And
no, it's Fairview High School, but it's from Old House.
Wait, I do? You ring it when you're ready.
I can get to do it like. Let me try.
I signed up for that
Yeah, she's here. Right there, right on that table. You can't see her.
Colorado.
Yeah, she's right there next to me.
But yeah, there it is. What the hell? What the hell? That's the wrong.
You can see, you know, the
I don't even
okay,
use
you know
that.
you're ready. Okay, I'm gonna get my night sheets, and then I'm going to.
It's so weird.
I know. Of course, my
I need to not be cold. Bring it.
It's really frustrating.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm David.
I'm Ben.
And today we're going to talk to you all about life under apartheid. So our research question was in Kaffir Boy by Mark Mathebane. How does Johannes and his family lose their identity, responsibility as humans, and power due to the cruel system of apartheid?
So a major thing we wanted to cover outside our essential questions was how during apartheid, minorities were always afraid of what could happen to them outside of their homes, and they never knew that when they went to work every day, they never knew if they would return home because of the amount of police brutality there was and the amount of laws there were with passes and such. You never knew if you'd get mugged by a street gang. You never knew if you'd wind up in jail just for walking on the wrong side of the street or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And we saw that in Kaffir Boy. Families would his father would leave work and then become jailed for a year just for not having his pass in order. So you never knew what would happen to you.
Okay, so relations to the history of apartheid. In 1948, the National Party, which as we know is South Africa's all-white government, began enforcing policies of racial segregation. In 1950, apartheid became an official law, and Dr. Hendrik Verwoerd, South Africa's prime minister, who became that title in 1958, established this Promotion of Bantu Self-Government Act of 1959, which created these 10 Bantu homelands called Bantustans, which between 1961 and 1964, more than 3.5 million black South Africans were forced to leave their homes and were deported to these cruel Bantustans, where they were thrust, as we saw in Kaffir Boy, these extreme poverty and living conditions, which were really rough and hard to survive in. In this sad Sharpeville massacre, at least 67 black South Africans were killed and 180 were wounded. The whites tried to limit the rebellion by black South Africans, and resistance leaders like Nelson Mandela and others like him were captured or sentenced to prison or executed. And Mandela, as we learned from the Nelson Mandela presentation, was in prison for 27 years. In 1976, thousands of black children in Soweto, which was a black township that was close to Johannesburg, protested the Afrikaans language requirement for black students, and the police then decided to open fire with tear gas and bullets. In 1980, the United Nations Security Council voted to impose an embargo on the sale of arms to South Africa in hopes that that would help send a message to them to stop apartheid. In 1985, the United States and the United Kingdom imposed economic sanctions on South Africa. And finally, after a long wait in 1994, a new constitution was formed in South Africa, and apartheid, that was the end of it.
Okay, so...
sorry.
How does life under apartheid relate to identity? Well, apartheid took away the identity of black people and other minorities through past laws, Bantu education, and classifying them as just a collective ethnicity that can only work and learn within their tribal scope if that's what they wanted. So one big example was Bantu education, and that was a way of making sure minorities only learned about tribal history, tribal values, and all that stuff. And it prepared minorities for a tribal way of life and nothing more, just working under white people and never being able to educate themselves really fully and succeed in life. Dr. Verwoerd, the prime minister who kind of crafted Bantu education, said that the native child must be taught subjects which will enable him to work with and amongst his own people. No use misleading him by showing him the green pastures of European society. So education was a way of controlling minorities and not letting them mingle with white society. And then the past laws in Bantu education were obviously not favorable amongst blacks and other minorities, so there were many protests which would in turn lead to police violence and just escalate the problems in South Africa. So power, the minorities in South Africa during the time had virtually no power and no freedom of protest or speech. You saw that police would constantly crack down on protesting and everything like that. And any white person, especially police and governmental figures, had all the power in society. One example of this was when the peri-urban and Kaffir boy could raid Alexandria and other townships whenever they wanted, and they didn't have to have any warrants or anything to go into people's houses like they do in the United States. And there was a passage, the police charged, several shots rang out, pandemonium broke out, students ran for cover, it rained tear gas canisters, and that was when students were peacefully protesting Bantu education in Kaffir boy. So yeah, you see here more police brutality, and the police and white people had all the power. Black people couldn't protest or do anything.
Okay, for us, this correlates to our next slide of what does it mean to be human as well. And it is our responsibility as humans to make the world a better place. But the apartheid system in general didn't allow people to pursue that goal whatsoever. Apartheid removed minorities and whites' responsibility of making the world a better place by forcing races to basically turn on one another and hate each other. And they forced people that were living in these awful slums to fight for survival every day, hoping they could make it out. And instead of working together to make a better South Africa, the government had to focus on oppressing minorities. As we said before, living in the ghetto was extremely tough and hard, and so they had to fight each other for food and survival. Like in Kaffir boy, when they're digging around the garbage dump for food, one lady says to Johannes' mother, "Your kids are so much better at finding food, why can't we have them?" And here's more pictures of uprising in South Africa. So here, what does it mean to be human? We say being human is showing compassion towards one another and making the world a better place, but the system of apartheid was the opposite of this. And here's that quote that we mentioned before about the lady who's talking about this, and she says a quote about how her former madam, who she worked for, had these elegant dinners every night, and she would have leftover meat packages from a day later, but she decided to throw them out. And one day, the slave asked her, "Hey, can I have that because you're done with it?" And she said, "No, I'm not giving that to you. I buy you food. Is that not enough?" But she gave her dog meat instead of the food that she eats. And yeah, now we're going to go to Kahoot.